As everyone across the NBA community knows, Russell Westbrook has been one of, if not the most disappointing player in the NBA so far this season. The experiment with him going to the Lakers is definitely not working out at all, and I think honestly his play has probably been the main problem for this team, and he just can't fit into the role that he's supposed to fit in with this Lakers team, and that's really the biggest problem here. And earlier in the year, I made a video about why Russell Westbrook could potentially come off of the bench for this Lakers team and how that might be able to solve some problems for them. But like I said in that video as well, his usage rate was too high, and coming off of the bench was a logical option, but just because of the way Westbrook plays and the way he's used to playing, he wouldn't be able to fit into that role. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in today's video, is how the truth about Russell Westbrook is he has too big of an ego to do things like take a lesser role and play off of the bench, and why this is such a problem for the Los Angeles Lakers. So let's get into the analysis. So last night, Russell Westbrook put up 5 points on 1 of 10 shooting from the field and 4 turnovers. While he's going to have these bad games, he is having good games as well, but his inconsistencies and the fact that he even got benched for the entire overtime period of last night's Lakers game against the New York Knicks, I mean, this is showing just how, like I said, he can be very inconsistent, and just things like his very poor jump shot, his many turnovers per game is just causing the Lakers a lot of problems. And here's the thing about Westbrook, he's always been that kind of player who doesn't have a good jump shot and turns the ball over a lot, but at the same time is a pretty dominant scorer around the rim, one of the best, if not the best, rebounding guard in the entire NBA, very electric in transition, and a good overall playmaker. And we know that in his years with the OKC, there was years where he was averaging a triple-double. He even averaged over 30 points per game and led the entire NBA in points per game in the 2017 season when he won MVP. And the thing is this playstyle was able to work with a team like the OKC Thunder, where he was clearly the best player on that team. He was able to be a slightly inefficient scorer and turn the ball over a lot because he was the number one option on that team. That was his role on the team, is to be the main guy, make risky passes at times, be the main facilitator and playmaker, and really be the main scorer obviously as well. Most of their baskets were when he was really driving towards the rim and penetrating towards the rim, and he was the one creating the offense. And really, because Russell Westbrook was the best player on that team, and they didn't have not only a good enough supporting cast, but other stars around him to be able to be the number one guy instead of him, this is why the OKC Thunder were never able to have playoff success when Russell Westbrook was that number one guy and he was playing that kind of role. Now, this is the problem with the Lakers, is Russell Westbrook doesn't necessarily realize that he's the third option on his team and he has to play like a third option. This is a guy here who's still attempting 16 shots per game and has a usage rate of about 27.5%, which is still almost as high as both LeBron James and Anthony Davis, which is honestly unacceptable. The Lakers have to find a way to give Westbrook a better role and a less significant role where he's playing definitely more as just kind of a facilitator and playmaker and less of a scorer. But like I said, this is just a role that Russell Westbrook simply cannot play because of his ego. And when we look at how many of the biggest weaknesses of his game are his jump shot, he is still attempting pretty much over 6 jump shots per game, as he's attempting over 3 mid-range shots per game and only shooting 31% from the mid-range area, which is extremely low, way below the league average. And he's still also attempting over 3.5 three-pointers per game and still only shooting 30% from 3. Not to mention that he's also throwing the ball away and turning it over 4 times per game, which is very poor as well. And like I said, this is really something Westbrook has been doing throughout his whole career. He's an inefficient scorer, not a good shooter, and throws a lot of turnovers. But not to mention that this year as well, he's been pretty much a liability on defense, not sticking to his man at all, being a very poor off-ball defender, not having his head in the game. This is something that hasn't really been a part of his career, and I think it's just getting to his head this season. That's part of the role he has to play as well, that he's not playing. And like I said, if if Russ is going to be an inefficient scorer and turn the ball over, that's okay if he's the number one option on that team. But now that he's playing a role where he isn't necessarily the main guy on the team, he has to understand that he's not being asked to score 25 points per game anymore and shoot 8 jump shots per game. He is asked to have much better and more nitpicky shot selection, get to the rim a lot more often, not be a defensive liability, and put up about 7 to 8 assists per game for this Lakers team. So that's the big problem with Russell Westbrook here, is his ego is too high, and he is simply not opening to playing a less role on this Lakers team, even if that's going to help them win games and get back into a playoff position and hopefully get back to being a championship contending team, because that's just not the player that he is. It's pretty evident that this is the role that the Lakers need Westbrook to play. They need his usage rate to be under 25%. They need him to be taking way less than 16 field goal attempts per game, and really they need Russell Westbrook to probably play about 30 minutes per game, take that down as well, take about, I'd say, 10 to 12 field goal attempts per game, really take that down, have him take about maybe even just 3 jump shots per game, really limit his shooting in the mid-range and the three-point area, since that is clearly hurting their team, as the analytics clearly say. Most of those times, those are just wasted possessions for the team, even if it's early in the shot clock and they can create something. That's not good for them. And also, Russell Westbrook needs to take him into account himself to turn the ball over less, make smarter passes, and be a better defender. This is the job that he's being asked to do, and he's just not understanding that, because first of all, his ego is too big. He himself needs to play that big role, because that's what he's been doing his entire career, and now it's kind of too late for him to change. If he was going to be able to change his playstyle, I feel like he definitely would have done it already, and a lot of people would say it's not too late to change, but at this point, I don't really see how he will be able to change that playstyle into being the guy that the Lakers need him to be in order to get back to being a championship contending team. And like I said, not only does Westbrook have such a high ego to the point where he thinks that he has to be averaging a 20 plus point triple-double for every season that he plays, but he really doesn't even understand what not only fans are asking him, but what his coach is wanting him to do and what the Lakers are wanting him to do for this team and the role that they're wanting him to play. As pretty recently, a couple weeks ago, I believe it was, he had an interview after a game where he was talking about basically he thinks that expectations for him on the court from fans and really the NBA community in general, the Lakers and everyone, he thinks that the expectations are too high for him, and he even said, the conversation has been heavily on how I'm playing and what I'm doing, but I think people are expecting me to have 25, 15, and 15, which that is not normal. Everybody has to understand, like, that's not a normal thing that people can do consistently. And what's clearly happening here is Russ is not understanding what fans are asking of him and criticizing him for. No one is asking for Russell Westbrook to put up 25, 15, and 15 every night. We already know that he has pretty much high enough volume scoring. When he gets to the rim, he can still be a good scorer around there. He's still a great rebounder and racks up a lot of assists with his good playmaking ability at times. That's not what we're asking him to do. We're not asking him to put up more stats in those areas. What people that actually watch basketball want Russell Westbrook to do to help the Lakers is do things like I've mentioned multiple times in this video, have much better shot selection, turn the ball over less, and not be a defensive liability. These are really the 3 things right here that we're asking Russell Westbrook to do, and he's not even really taking any type of movement towards getting better at those, because like I said, not only does he have too big of an ego to the point where he thinks he has to be the number one option on the team, but he doesn't even understand that that's really what he's being asked to do by the NBA community. Obviously, this is a big problem here, and if Russell Westbrook hasn't figured this out, really throughout the last few years, where he's been playing roles on teams where he's second or third options, like on the Rockets with James Harden, on the Wizards with Bradley Beal, and now of course on the Lakers with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. If he still hasn't figured it out by now, I don't see how he's going to figure it out really ever for the rest of his career. Russell Westbrook is at a point right now where every team that you stick him on is becoming mediocre, no matter how good they were before. The LA Lakers before last season were the best team in the NBA. Last year they weren't. They got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs, of course, but that was a lot because of the injury problems that they were going through as well. They put Russell Westbrook on this team, and all of a sudden they were in the play-in tournament area in the standings because Russ does not understand the role that he has to play, and he is really taking away from others by still playing too big of a role and not understanding what he has to do on the floor to help this team. If this problem doesn't get solved, the Lakers are not going to solve really any of their problems, because Russell Westbrook's role is the biggest problem on this team. And like I've said many times throughout today's video, the fact that he's still taking too many jump shots per game, turning it over too much, being a defensive liability, these are the big problems for the Lakers that have to be solved. And for them to get back to being a championship caliber team, they are going to have to figure out a way for Russell Westbrook to put his ego aside, understand the role that he truly has to play on this team, and get past all his issues. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on what the real truth is about Russell Westbrook and what he has to do to solve his problems, how he has to really put his ego aside and understand the role that he has to play on the court for the Los Angeles Lakers. Thank you guys for watching today's video. Be sure to comment your thoughts down below on this amazingly unique and tough situation with Russell Westbrook and the Los Angeles Lakers. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all next video.